My cousin runs a pub in Fremantle, and last Tuesday this American woman walked in asking where she could find authentic local hospitality. He told her she was standing in it. She looked around at the half-empty bar. No tablecloths, no host. Stand, just blokes nursing beers and a chalkboard menu. Then said, no. I mean, like where the service is really friendly. You've just seen the kind of nuance most people miss in everyday encounters. I track these interactions full-time so you don't have to subscribe if you want to see the patterns that most people overlook, he pointed at himself. She waited for him to say more. He didn't. She left to find somewhere with better customer care standards, which I assume meant napkin origami and waiters who compliment your outfit. The review she left online called us disappointingly casual for a hospitality venue. A tour guide outside Darwin, and we get coach groups through from America pretty regularly. Last month I'm walking 12 of them through the wetlands when this bloke from Phoenix stops me mid-sentence and asks if I'm being sarcastic. I just said the crocodiles were beautiful creatures, which they are, objectively. He said back home. People only use that tone when they're mocking someone, and he didn't appreciate the disrespect. I explained, I genuinely think they're beautiful. He squinted at me like I'd spoken Mandarin. His wife stage whispered that Australians have a dry sense of humor, which somehow made it worse because now they spent the rest of the tour analyzing every single sentence I said, trying to decode hidden insults that didn't exist. Most people miss the subtle cues that reveal cultural blind spots. I break these down every week for subscribers. If that's your kind of insight, you know what to do. Manage a bottle shop in Cairns. American couple comes in, asks for wine recommendations. I tell them the Shiraz is solid, nothing fancy but drinks well. The husband goes, just solid? Not exceptional or award-winning? I said it's good wine, does the job. He asked if I was being paid to undersell it. His wife jumped in with, he's probably just being modest, that's so sweet. Neither understood I was giving them an honest review. They walked out with the most expensive bottle we had, convinced I'd been protecting them from my solid garbage wine through reverse psychology. Sometimes I think Americans need every statement notarized. I work reception at a medical center in Adelaide. This American patient came in for her appointment. And when the doctor called her name from the doorway, she walked up and said, "It's such an honor to meet you. I've heard you're the best in your field." The doctor looked confused, told her to take a seat. After the appointment, the woman stopped at my desk to say she was concerned the doctor had an ego problem because he didn't respond to her compliment. I explained he probably just found it awkward. She insisted people in positions of authority expect recognition. I told her doctors here are just people doing their jobs. She said, well, that explains the lack of professionalism. I'm still working out what she meant by that. My sister's a receptionist at a law firm in Melbourne. American businessman came in for a meeting with one of the partners. When the partner walked out to greet him, first name basis, business casual Friday outfit. The American asked if the actual lawyer was coming or if this was an assistant. My sister had to explain that was the senior partner he'd been emailing for 3 weeks. He said, but he's dressed like he works at Best Buy. During the meeting, he apparently kept calling him Mr. Morrison, despite being told 4 times to just use Dave. Afterward, he told my sister the firm needed to implement proper hierarchy indicators so clients could identify who's important. Dave's been practicing law for 27 years. I think he knows who he is. I'm a nurse in a Brisbane public hospital. Had an American woman as a patient last month. Lovely person, broken ankle from a hiking accident. Every single time I came into her room, she thanked me profusely, said I was an angel. Asked if there was a manager she could speak to about how incredible I was. On day 3, I finally told her, I'm just doing my job, no need for the whole production. She teared up and said, you deserve recognition for your hard work. I explained that recognition is my paycheck, which comes whether she compliments me or not. She looked devastated, like I'd rejected a marriage proposal. Later, she asked another nurse if I was going through something personal because I seemed angry at kindness. I wasn't angry. I was busy. There's a difference, but apparently not to Americans. My brother works at a university in Sydney. He's a professor, been teaching for 15 years. American exchange student came to his office hours and spent 10 minutes telling him how honored she was to learn from someone so distinguished. He said thanks and asked what she needed help with regarding the assignment. She launched into how his published work changed her perspective on post-colonial theory. He cut her off, asked again about the assignment. She looked hurt and said she was just trying to show respect. He told her the best respect she could show was engaging with the actual course material instead of flattering him. She filed a complaint with the department head saying he was hostile to student admiration. The head read it, forwarded it to my brother with the subject line, "American Alert." They deal with this twice a semester, apparently. I'm a barista in a Hobart cafe. American guy ordered a flat white last Thursday, watched me make it, then waited at the counter. I slid it over. He stood there. I asked if he needed something else. He said, "Just waiting for you to bring it to my table." I told him he takes it himself. He said, "I thought this was full service." I explained we're not full service, we're a cafe. He picked up the coffee, walked to his table, came back 2 minutes later to tell me he'd decided not to leave a tip because counter service doesn't warrant the same gratuity expectations. I hadn't been expecting a tip in the first place. He insisted on explaining his reasoning anyway, like I was the franchise owner devastated by his financial protest. I make $28 an hour whether he tips or not. His moral stand affected no one. My cousin works at a restaurant in Perth. American family came in, 8 of them, wanted a table right away on a Friday night, no booking. He said it'd be about 40 minutes. The dad asked if there was any way to expedite that. My cousin said no, but they could wait at the bar. The dad slipped him a $50 note and said, "We'd really appreciate it if you could find us something sooner." My cousin handed it back and said the wait's still 40 minutes. The dad looked offended and said, "I'm trying to make it worth your while." My cousin explained that's not how it works here and kept the note refused. The family waited exactly 40 minutes, then left a 1-star review saying the staff was uncooperative and rude, despite generous offers of compensation. They genuinely could not process that money doesn't skip queues in Australia. I work at a fish and chip shop on the Gold Coast. American tourist ordered the lot, paid, then stood at the counter staring at me. I asked if she needed sauce. She said, "When does someone bring it to me?" I told her I'd call her number when it's ready. She can grab it from the counter. She said, "So it's serve yourself?" I said, "Yeah, pretty much." She walked to a table, sat down, kept looking back at me like I was supposed to be doing something. When her number got called, she didn't move. I called it again. She waved at me. I pointed at the counter. She didn't budge. Finally, I walked it over to her table. She said, "Thank you so much." I wasn't sure what the system was. The system was, I call your number and you collect your food. Her version of the system was I become a waitress at a takeaway shop. My dad owns a bakery in Bendigo. American couple came in before dawn. Clearly just off a red eye, asked what time we start doing real breakfast service. Said we've got sausage rolls, meat pies, pastries, sandwiches. The wife said no, like eggs Benedict, pancakes, French toast. He explained, "We're a bakery, not a brunch restaurant." The husband said, "But you're open at 6 a.m. Don't breakfast places open early?" My dad told him breakfast places do, but this is a bakery. They left confused, came back an hour later with takeaway from somewhere else and asked if they could eat it at one of our tables since the seating here is nicer. My dad said no. The husband called him unwelcoming to tourists. We're a bakery. We bake things. The business model isn't complicated. I drive rideshare in Canberra. Picked up an American couple from the airport. They're heading to a hotel in the city center. Guy in the back seat asks how far it is. Tell him about 15 minutes, he says. That's it. In the States, 15 minutes wouldn't even get you out of the airport parking lot. I said, well, we're not as sprawling. He took that as an insult to American infrastructure and spent the rest of the ride explaining how efficient wide highways are compared to our cramped road systems. We have a population smaller than Texas. Our roads work fine. But he needed me to understand America does transportation better. As though I'd been sitting in traffic my whole life waiting for his validation. My uncle's a train conductor on the Melbourne-Sydney route. American woman asked him if the train goes all the way without stopping. He said no, it makes several stops. She asked why they don't have express trains like Japan. He explained this is the express train relative to driving. She said, but it takes 11 hours, he said, because it's 900 kilometers. She responded, that's only like 560 miles. Trains in Europe do that in half the time. He told her, European trains run through multiple countries with dense populations, and we're crossing mostly empty land. She said maybe Australia should invest in better infrastructure. My uncle's been hearing this same conversation for 20 years. Americans arrive expecting bullet trains across the outback, then blame us when physics and population density don't bend to their imagination. I'm a flight attendant for a domestic carrier. American passenger on a Brisbane to Perth flight asked me what time zone we'd be landing in. I told her Western Standard Time, 2 hours behind. She said, "Wait, Australia has multiple time zones." I confirmed. She said, "But it's not that big." I explained. "It's about the size of the continental United States." She said, "I thought it was like the size of California." I told her no, it's massive. She pulled up a map on her phone, zoomed in and out. A few times then said, "I guess the map makes it look smaller." It doesn't. The map is to scale. She'd simply assumed an entire continent was California-sized because that's the version that existed in her head. After landing, she asked if Perth was close to Sydney in case she wanted to drive there on the weekend. "It's a 40-hour drive," she asked if I was joking. I wasn't. She said, "That's insane." As though Australia's geography was some kind of prank we'd been pulling on cartographers. I work at a car rental agency in Alice Springs. American guy rented a sedan, asked for a map with all the roads marked. I gave him one. He looked at it and said, "This is incomplete." "Where are the other roads?" I told him that's all of them. He said, "There's no way. The middle is just blank." I explained there aren't roads through the center because it's remote desert. He said, "Then how do people get across?" I told him they'd fly or drive the long way around. He insisted there had to be local routes we weren't marking for tourists. I showed him satellite images. He stared at them for a full minute, then said, "So you're telling me there's just nothing there?" I said, "Essentially, yes." He rented the car anyway, came back 3 days later to complain that his GPS kept losing signal in the empty zones. Those empty zones are called the Outback, and they're empty because they're empty. He wanted a refund for defective navigation. The navigation worked fine. The roads just don't exist. I manage a bookshop in Hobart. American tourists came in asking if we had books on Australian English. I pointed her to a section. She picked one up, flipped through it, then asked why we spelled things wrong. I said, "We don't. We spell them differently," she said. "But color has a U in it here. That's incorrect." Explained that's correct in Australian English. She said, "But Webster's dictionary says it's without the U." I told her Webster's is American, we use Oxford. She looked genuinely confused and said there are multiple correct ways to spell words. I confirmed. She said that seems inefficient. I didn't know what to say to that. She bought the book anyway, but I'm certain she did it out of anthropological curiosity, the way you'd buy a guide to some isolated tribe's peculiar customs. We spell color with a U. It's not a typo. It's a different country. My brother's a receptionist at a hotel in Surfer's Paradise. American guest called down at 2 a.m. because his air conditioning wasn't working. My brother went up to check. The guy had it set to 18 degrees Celsius. My brother adjusted it to 22. The guy said, "I want it at 65. My brother explained, "We use Celsius here." The guy said, "Can you just convert it?" My brother said it's already converted. 22 Celsius is about 72 Fahrenheit. The guy said, "Why don't you just use Fahrenheit like normal people?" My brother told him the rest of the world uses Celsius. America's the outlier. The guy said, "That doesn't make it right." He filed a complaint the next morning about confusing international temperature standards, making the room uncomfortable. The air conditioning worked perfectly. He was just mad that numbers were different than the numbers he was used to. Welcome to the metric system. Population. Everyone but you. I bartend at a pub in Wollongong. Last weekend, this American bloke sat at the bar for 2 hours nursing a beer, watching me work. Finally, he leaned over and said, "You know, you're actually really good at this." I said, "Thanks." Continued. Like I was expecting Australian service to be more laid back, but you're efficient. I told him we're always efficient. That's how pubs work. He said, "Yeah, but you're also friendly without being over the top, which is refreshing." I just nodded. He kept going. In the States, everyone's so performative, you know? It's nice to be somewhere where people just do their jobs well without making a big show of it. I said, "That's kind of been the whole point, mate." He looked at me like I'd solved a riddle. Sometimes Americans need to experience the absence of theater before they realize theater isn't the same as good service. I've been slinging drinks the same way for 8 years. Nothing about my approach changed when he walked in. The difference is he finally stopped waiting for a performance that was never coming.